Hi there, this is Tracy, and today I have a special guest. I am in New York City with Joyce Short, and Joyce is an author and an expert on love scamming. Is that a good word to put it?
Romance scams.
Romance
Yep, absolutely.
scamming. I love this. So Joyce has written a book already, and she's got a new one in the hopper. What is it called?
It's called Combating Romance Scams, Why Lying to Get Laid is a Crime.
And I thought with our narcissist community that this was going to be such a good topic because I believe that we have all been conned. And so meeting her and listening to an interview, I just fell in love with this and said, this is what we need to learn about. So for you, something happened that got you on this mission.
Very much so.
Would you share it?
Oh, I'll share a bit. Actually, the story is in my first book, which is Carnal Abuse by Deceit, How a Predator's Lies Became Rape. Basically, I was romance scammed. And I was scammed long before the internet. There was no information about how this happens, why it happens, or what to do if it happens to you. Mm-hmm. I lived through it and put my life back together. It was a very long struggle. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to make it apparent to society, because I'm sure that I wasn't the only person that struggled in this way and had encountered the same circumstance. And so I wanted to make sure that society had the language to be able to discuss it. If you didn't have a name for it, how do you even contemplate, how do you express what's happened to you or articulate what's happened to you if there are no words out there that you can express or use in order to do so? I
would imagine victims, as a victim of narcissist abuse, I was not aware that I was being abused. I didn't know the term, and I didn't know anything wasn't normal because it seemed normal, right? How do victims put two and two together? I mean, it's certainly not you go on the dating site and say, I want to date someone that's going to scam me, right?
No, you don't say that.
Not often.
Nope. Definitely not.
But how do victims come to terms or understand that this is something that might have happened to them?
Well, I think that as you go through a relationship and a certain amount of toxicity is created in that relationship, when you recognize that you've been lied to, you have to wonder whether that person is in fact altogether in terms of their character. Do they have a character disorder? Are they a pathological liar? Mm-hmm. How deeply woven is the fabric that you've now been caught in this net?
Right.
So when you recognize that everything that you thought existed in this relationship was a pack of lies, and they're pretending to be someone that they're not, then you have to begin to understand that the brain chemistry of love and trust and the emotions that you feel are fueled actually by your brain chemistry. And Mother Nature gave us that brain chemistry for that purpose. Our offspring take quite a long time to develop. And so Mother Nature has created brain chemistry that actually glues us, mates us with that person. And people that are sexual predators, emotional predators, they know how to manipulate your brain chemistry, which is the chemistry of attraction, mm-hmm. in order to embed you in that relationship. And it's very, very difficult to get out of. The whole concept of why you have it is so that the relationship doesn't break apart, so that you can both nurture your developing offspring mm-hmm. to maturity.
Right.
So you're stuck like glue. And when people wonder why someone who's abused or misused doesn't simply recognize, they were abusive, they either we're emotionally abusive or physically abusive, why don't I just run for the exit door?
Right.
A lot of it has to do with that brain chemistry that's keeping you glued to that relationship. And it's like an addiction. And if you can recognize romantic brain chemistry as a form of addiction, then you can begin to understand, okay, if this was alcohol, I would be imbibing it, I'd recognize it, I'd be forcing it down my throat, I'd be sipping the drink, and I'd know what was going on. But when we're imbibing a relationship, we don't recognize it as having effects on our dopamine, our serotonin, the chemicals in our brain that form attachment.
And in our narcissist world, we often talk about love bombing. And love bombing is at the beginning when they can't get enough of you. Is this all the chemical part that they're doing to us?
Absolutely, absolutely. And some narcissists, sociopaths, whatever you want to call them, they're emotional predators. They recognize that they need to raise your level of attachment. And so they're going to do that initially. Once they've raised your level of attachment, if you are a morally intact human being, you're going to feel loyalty toward that person. You're going to feel kindness and empathy toward that person. If they have difficulties, you're going to help that person,
Right.
get through that obstacle, get across that obstacle, and go on and live a happy, productive life. So if they need money in order to resolve a debt, if they need immigration status, you're going to, if you're emotionally involved with that person, you're going to attempt to help them with whatever ailments they present in that relationship.
Yeah, I sure know that one.
It's a way of manipulating you by embroiling you in a loving bond.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people that haven't had that experience of being in a relationship that wasn't real, I think that it's really, really hard to understand when your friend or someone that you love, a sister or brother, is now saying that the person that they've been married to is this evil predator, right? What point I mean, I know as a victim, when they start this discard and they go through the end portion of a relationship, that those are the things that enlighten the victim to do this research and to get help. But what kind of advice can we offer to their friends and family to say, this is real?
Yeah, that's a very good point. What happens to you as the victim is that your brain chemistry is raised and you're reacting as a result of how those neuropeptides and hormones make you feel. The people on the external part of this relationship, your friends and your family, they're not taken in by that kind of emotional bond, but they are taken in by whatever you say to them about this person. So they have beliefs that were established that you sang their praises. You convinced them that this was a wonderful person. Now they have to somehow reevaluate everything you told them, and that's not such an easy thing to do. You've established how they're relating to this person, and now your interest is to change their reaction to this person. Some people will say, well, it's something that you did and therefore you have to live with it, you can just walk away. And that's simply because they don't understand the chemistry of bonding.
Right.
And they don't understand that it's not so easy to walk away, that you're chemically addicted to this person.
Yes.
People will often, in the process of kicking the habit, part of it is the process of rumination.
What does that mean?
Rumination is when we go over and over and over in our minds like a broken record what we could have done in order to hold on to this relationship, what we could have done differently. Was it us? What did we do? We don't recognize that it was all a ploy. It was not what we thought. This person is an emotional predator. They're putting this charming exterior in front of you so that you'll feel attachment to them, but nothing that you value in that person actually exists. And if you can recognize that, then it's a lot easier to break away. And if you can recognize that your that your brain chemistry is causing you those feelings of attachment, then you can staunchly, if I quit smoking, I cold turkeyed, I lost 15 pounds in the process. I've got real tough willpower, and you have to exert some willpower in order to break away. Expecting your loved ones and people that are surrounding you to recognize that person is a terrible person. Some of them will and some of them won't. Mm-hmm. Some of them will say, I knew that person was a terrible person and you made your bed, lie in it, or just walk away, because they don't understand that the pull of that relationship and your brain chemistry is keeping you there. And that whole concept of rumination, thinking it over and over and over again, you're doing that because your brain chemistry still ties you to that relationship. And even though on a very intellectual level, you know that they scammed you and that they're a con artist, but realistically, Mother Nature is still keeping you in that relationship because Mother Nature doesn't understand con artists.
Right. That would make sense.
Yeah.
The premise of everything that you're doing is that this is a crime, to use deceit and to con people to have sex.
Correct.
And how widespread is that
Huge.
Kind of a law? I mean, we know that it's like, is the law grabbing a hold of it? Do states, how many states are involved that say yes and prosecute?
There are 2 states in all of the United States that have laws that will prosecute someone who lies to you in order to engage you in sex.
Wow, which ones?
Alabama,
okay,
and Tennessee.
Don't live there.
Yeah, in Alabama, it's a misdemeanor.
Uh-huh.
You can go to jail for misdemeanors, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. In Tennessee, it's a felony.
Wow.
Now, other states have attempted to pass laws.
Mm-hmm.
Right here in New York, a senator by the name of Greg Ball tried to enact a catfish law. Catfish is a person on the internet that creates a romance scam.
Okay.
So he dubbed his particular law the catfish law. And he tried to pass a law here in New York in 2013. Didn't fly. I was actually involved in a law that was submitted in New Jersey about a year after I published my first book, Carnal Abuse by Deceit. The victim had read my story and recognized that what happened to her was rape by fraud, which is the generic name for the crime. When I use the term rape, I try to stay away from the term rape because people often think that rape involves violence or has to involve violence. And no, most states have recognized that there are many, many different ways to basically undermine a person's self-determination over their reproductive organs. You can do it through many, many different means, not all of them violence. And so rape is generic. Sexual assault is probably more in tune with how people relate to this crime today. So yeah, there was an attempt here in New York. There was an attempt in Massachusetts, in the town that I was born. In fact, the person who introduced the law is now the sheriff in Newton, Massachusetts, which is where I was born.
Wow.
He at the time was in the House of Representatives. His name is Peter Katuchian. And yet that law didn't pass. And unfortunately, laws don't pass because people think that they're too broad. They think it's a slippery slope. After having advocated for this for so many years, I've heard just about every naysaying, contradictory concern that society throws at this concept. And realistically, it can be controlled. It's not a slippery slope. There are things that are inherent in the law itself that would make it, that makes it really very difficult to prosecute. So, yeah, if it happens to you in Alabama or Tennessee, by all means, go speak to the police.
Yeah.
If it happens to you in California, recently California passed a law that covers one portion of this. They cover the portion that's called fraud in the factum. Fraud in the factum is deceit over the action itself.
Wow.
So let's say you went to a doctor, and the doctor told you that they were going to do something that was medically necessary, and instead they sexually molested you. They touched your genitals. Recent case in Massachusetts, the doctor touched the woman's genitals. He's a back surgeon. There was no reason for him to do so. He also massaged her breasts. She was one of 2 victims that came forward, and they actually brought litigation against this man. The prosecutor got involved and pressed charges against him. But similarly, right down the street, and that happened in Worcester, Massachusetts, and right down the street in Middlesex County, which is where Newton, Massachusetts is, and where Peter Katuchin lives, the prosecutor in Middlesex County would not prosecute a very, very similar case. Wow. So there's no continuity in this law. Every state has its own penal code. So you can go from state to state. In one state, you can actually file a claim of rape by fraud if someone who's underage lies to you and you have sex with them and you get arrested for statutory rape. So rape by fraud is a defense against statutory rape in 8 states.
Oh, wow.
However, only 2 states enable people who are victimized by rape by fraud without any involvement of statutory rape to bring a claim against the offender.
Now, what would be, I know that a lot of the predators in this situation lie. I mean, that's like a pathological lie, almost like coming out their pores. So what would stop, if we were just talking about the statutory rape, what would stop a man who just had sex with a 15-year-old from saying, oh, she told me she's 18? What's to stop or police the real perpetrator from lying about what the young girl did or said? Unfortunately,
rape is a very, very difficult case to prove. There actually is very little. It's he said, she said. When you get in front of a judge and jury, the judge's function there is to make sure that that trial takes place according to the law. The jury determines whether or not things that are being put into evidence as fact are fact indeed. So the jury determines whether or not what you're expressing as fact is in fact fact. Is in fact fact.
Fact. We like that. Fact, fact.
Okay. And this is the case in all rape or sexual assault issues, but we don't fail to recognize that it's a crime simply because it's difficult to prosecute. Any criminal offense is difficult to prosecute. You need proof in order to convict someone of murder. You need proof to convict someone of stealing your money. You need proof to convict someone of raping you. And unfortunately, rape is an extraordinarily difficult case to prove.
I would imagine too, especially looking at our targets of abuse. It's months later when you learn what a sociopath, narcissist, what the people are, and what just happened. It's quite a long time. So there's no rape kit, and it's he said, she said, and I can imagine. As I've had this situation, the police are just sitting there telling you that, you are not getting over the relationship.
Yes.
Wow. Get on with your life. Get over it.
You had fun, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's exactly what one police officer told the victim when they went to complain about this crime. They literally said to them, "Hey, you had fun, didn't you?
Yeah.
What's your complaint?" So when you have proof, when you have actual written documentation that this person misrepresented themselves to you, you have a greater likelihood of being able to prosecute the crime.
Okay.
So a lot of romances today begin on the internet. And people write what we call catfish profiles.
That sounds so horrible.
They're basically full of lies. The profile is full of lies. They're telling you the wrong age. They're telling you that they're single when they're married. They're giving you a lot of information in a written form, and you're relying on that information. You have proof that that person has lied to you. The other way that you can prove that a person has lied to you is if you don't live this relationship in a bubble, and in fact other people have been involved in the misrepresentations that they've given you, then those people can support your claim and act as witnesses.
Right.
So it evolves from being a he said, she said into something more provable.
Right.
And so these cases, if there is a way of proving the misrepresentations that you were given, then you have a greater chance of actually pursuing it as a crime.
That makes sense. I mean, in my case, it's a very difficult thing to prove because I've already been convicted of a crime being in his driveway and domestic violence, which he lied to get that charge on me. So it's even more difficult for me. I went to the chief of police to just ask him questions, and his secretary said, "We don't talk to perpetrators."
Wow.
And I was like, "But I have this evidence I'd like you to look at." Put her hand up and said, "I've been working for him for 16 years and I'm not going to let him talk to you."
Yeah.
And I thought that was odd because I am a citizen. I do pay taxes. I am a victim. I was being treated by a victim advocate program for 10 weeks. And they are like, "We don't take people unless they are and have been victims."
Yeah.
And yet, because of that, phone call, I became the perpetrator. So I imagine, my life with the police was a very difficult kind of thing. And I can't imagine taking something even this far when nobody wants to believe you.
Also, when you have that sort of situation, when the police don't believe you, and you want to pursue some kind of justice for yourself, the best thing to do is to find an attorney.
Oh, I had one. He was a narcissist. I didn't know it, but he was unfortunately just, he just wanted his money, and he just was like, "You have to do this, you have to do this," and he wouldn't, yeah. So, aside from going for a $20,000 or $30,000 case, that was my only opportunity to do it and spend 10, a bargain. So
these cases, unfortunately, are not resolvable until we actually have a sexual assault by fraud law,
right.
That makes it a criminal offense. And I'll give you an example. There's a woman in New Jersey who was defrauded, catfish crime. He found her on the internet, and he defrauded her of $223,000. Okay? This is a lovely woman, intelligent, professional woman. She's a physical trainer. She's cute as a button. And just a lovely, lovely person, has 3 children, and fell in love with this fellow who claimed that he was like a Bernie Madoff.
Oh, no.
He was a wealth manager. And he had the proofs on the internet to support his business claims. So he had really done a lot of homework in order to set himself up in this fictitious image. And he knew that she had a 401k. And he convinced her that he could get her better return on her 401k. So this is not unreasonable. You're in love with this man. You trust him. He's a wealth manager. You're going to turn your 401k over and see if he can do better than what
What's been doing.
Yeah, this is, plausible, very plausible that a person would do that if you're in love with this man. Okay, so now she's out the $223,000, and now the government comes after her for $49,000, which is the penalty, right? Because she didn't take her money out of a 401k and invested in another 401k, which would have enabled her, if you're just rolling it over, then you're not going to incur the penalties. Okay. And in addition, he had gotten access to her credit cards and run up a considerable amount of credit card debt. So she went to an attorney, and it cost her thousands of dollars in order to pursue this case. She got a judgment against this man.
Did he go to jail?
No, there's no law in New Jersey to send this man to jail. In fact, she was contacted by the white-collar crimes prosecutor, and that may be the way that this man is finally prosecuted. However, even though she has, and even though she's gone through a tremendous effort to get restitution and seek justice, and even though she has there was a positive result from that from that process, she hasn't been able to collect a dime.
And he
He's
doesn't go to
completely
jail.
defaulted. No.
That
Completely
just
defaulted.
seems like absolutely.
And that's what happens.
Are there no laws? I mean, forget the romance scam thing. Are there no laws against con men?
Of course there are. But when they have no assets and you're bringing a civil case against them.
And they probably took her money and just threw it in.
I think he bought a
somewhere.
house. I think was yeah. I'm not sure. What the actual destination was for her money. But yeah, that's one individual case. And so when people try to bring cases, first off, the person, the offender, is probably going to countersue you, because now you're exposing them in a public way, and so they'll countersue you for defamation or for for bringing a false case against them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that because they're very litigious. They have this down and they know, okay, if this happens, look, I can get more money from her because I already got her 200 grand.
Yes.
Why is it a crime to deceive someone to have sex with you?
When you have sex with a person, you have the right of consent. And consent isn't what people think. Consent doesn't simply mean agreement. It means knowledgeable and informed agreement.
Okay.
So if you undermine their ability to be knowledgeable and informed, they're not capable of giving you consent. There's another type of agreement. It's called assent. A-S-S-E-N-T.
Okay.
And my theory is, if you fool a person into thinking that they're giving you consent, when in fact all they're capable of giving you is assent, then you're an ass and a con artist. and you're also a sexual predator and a rapist. Because when you undermine a person's ability to consent, you're taking away their self-determination. And if you're taking away their self-determination regarding the use of their money, then that's theft. When you take away their self-determination in relation to their reproductive organs, then that's a sexual assault.
Mm-hmm.
And so, indeed, it's a crime.
That is really important to know, because I think in a situation where you are in a romantic relationship, people don't even go this far to think. I mean, we can all go, oh, I had the bad boyfriend, the bad husband, but it isn't consenting if you think that you're with this person and it's really this person.
Correct.
And that they like you said with your person that you knew, they thought it was this person and that was all lie. You know,
Right.
They thought they were this life. You thought you were exclusive. They were promising and telling and lying to you about that. And then it's a different person.
Right.
So that is something that we have to change, and yet so hard to police, because how do you, oh yeah, he lied. Well,
Yeah.
you know,
It's a form of defilement. What people end up feeling is the same sense of defilement as if they were violently raped. They're not violently terrorized. They don't bear the scars and the bruises of a violent rape, but they bear their psyche bears the scars of a defilement. They feel contamination,
okay.
sexual contamination by this person. And that's a very real bruising of the psyche, even though physically you're not bruised.
Right.
Your brain is a physical part of your body, and it is very much a factor in whether or not a crime indeed happened to you.
Yeah. So many of these narcissist abuse victims are PTSD, and they are really traumatized, as if they had seen someone get shot in, a war. This is something that the police and our friends don't really understand.
Right.
Is this is not visible on the outside.
Right.
This is not a black eye, and yet can't eat, can't sleep, don't trust, afraid to go outside.
Right.
It's
a form of PTSD called complex PTSD. And the difference is that in PTSD, you have a particular traumatic event that creates that impact on your psyche. It alters how your mind relates. When you experience coercive control, then you also have those impacts on your psyche. And interestingly, in a violent rape, you're raped once. In a rape by fraud, or a sexual assault by fraud, you might be sexually violated multiple times. You don't recognize it at the time, but once you recognize it, all of that intimacy that you experienced as love comes back and whops you upside the face, and you're now dealing with, it could be weeks, it could be months, it could be years of treachery, and it creates complex PTSD.
I know it does, and I know that a lot of people are looking for solutions on getting that, and certainly starting with a doctor, certainly starting with a psychiatrist that's going to diagnose you and help you really uncoil the mess, because it isn't just a bad breakup that you won't get over.
Right.
It is something that you do need help for, so that you understand your role and don't let that happen again. You understand there are people out there like this, and how to protect yourself. I think that's something that they need, maybe some antidepressants or something that's
well,
going to
sometimes
help
you do
them
need
get
an
outside.
antidepressant in order to get over the immediacy of the despair and depression that you feel. And there are even therapists that do not comprehend narcissistic victim syndrome. If you go on the website of Dr. Christine Louis de Cannonville, she's an advocate for getting narcissistic victim syndrome in DSM. But a lot of therapists don't really understand the impacts of narcissistic abuse on a person. So you can go to a therapist, but make sure that the therapist, that you interview that therapist before you pour your heart out. Make sure that they, number one, have experience with complex PTSD. There are methodologies today that therapists use, EMDR, tapping, different things that they can do that will help get you on the road to recovery. Antidepressants is certainly one of them, and I encourage everyone to seek the aid of a therapist. Don't try and medicate yourself. Don't use alcohol, it's a depressant. Don't use drugs, you'll create more of a problem for yourself. Find a good therapist who understands complex PTSD, who understands coercive control and narcissistic behavior in order to get yourself back on the road to recovery.
Yeah, it's so important. My own personal experience was a therapist that I love dearly, but he did not know about narcissist abuse, and he lived through my horrific divorce, which was with my narcissist husband. He lived through my mother who passed away and actually treated her, and she was a narcissist, and lived through this guy. So it was really a disservice to me, because I was throwing lifelines. I was like, help me, I don't understand. Why is this happening to me? Why is it happening again?
And the answer to that question, very simply, is because you're an empathetic human being. You have the brain chemistry of attachment that works well, and people who are predators look for empathy in a human being, and they can spot you across a crowded room.
Oh, goody.
And you need to understand, when you're an empathetic person, that there are people who will undermine you.
And learn boundaries. I think, if something doesn't feel right, I'm putting them up for the first time in my life, which is really important to heal.
Good for you.
Yeah. So let's talk about changing the laws. How can people do this? Because I would love to take this to Colorado and do as much as we can to reach the right people. And I know your new book's about that. And when is it coming out?
Well, I would love for you to take it to Colorado. And I hope that the new book, which is Combating Romance Scams, will be coming out on November 1st.
Awesome.
I hope, cross my fingers, working hard to do that. Basically, I wrote it because, I've advocated for this law to be passed for many, many years. It's now been 3 years since my original book came out, and I've heard all the naysaying, I've heard all the contradictory information. I've been involved in the introduction of the law in New Jersey that didn't make it, and I understand what has to be in that law in order for it to pass. We as a nation, as a society, have to get on the same page. We have to have a consistent law, consistent language, consistent understanding. And that's why I've put it together in a book, so that whether you're in Colorado or you're in California or you're in Mississippi or Massachusetts, everywhere you go will have a law that stipulates and gets this done. And that was the purpose of my writing this book. It provides the language for the law. It provides all of the supports for why this law should exist. It also helps people recognize what they can do to stay safe and what to do if it happens to you.
Who are we talking to make a change?
Your legislators have to make that change. In every state, well, let me give you New York for an example. We have an assembly and we have a Senate.
Mm-hmm.
And the bill has to actually be introduced in both houses.
Mm.
It can't just be introduced in the assembly and automatically pass in the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be introduced both places.
Okay.
It would be helpful if people read the book and contacted me.
Okay.
Anybody can contact me on stopromancescams@yahoo.com. When I hear from people in any state, I can put people together, because the more people that have encountered this problem in a state that go to the legislators with this law, with this book,
I love that.
right? That's how we're going to combat it. We're going to group people together in the individual states, because penal code is enacted state by state.
Okay.
So we're going to group people together in every state, and they're going to read the book, they're going to go to their legislators, they're going to say, read this book, here's my story, here's my story, here's my story, we want this law passed. What are you going to do about it?
And is it good to do it now, a little pre-election, or should we just wait till we see who gets in?
So yeah, when there's election coming up, they'll make a commitment to you.
So we should make both sides promise then.
Yeah, that would be a good thing. But the
Absolutely.
election's coming up in November,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
So's your
and the
book.
book is coming
Yeah.
out on hopefully November 1st. It doesn't give you much time to make appointments with.
It's true. But you know what?
Yeah.
The world is full of people that are making YouTube videos.
Yep.
The world is full of people watching YouTube videos on all of this kind of romance scam, narcissist abuse, codependency. It's just like a tornado. Everything's coming to a head, and everyone is demanding help.
Right.
And a law, and I want to say vengeance, but it's more like
Justice.
Justice.
Correct.
Is where do we? Someone please listen to me. And I think what you're doing is so amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And I am so thankful that you came and did this interview. And where can they find you on your website?
My blog address, the URL, is stoprapebyfraud.com.
Yay. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Joyce Short and Tracy Malone, and we are really grateful that she's given us this information. Is there anything else that you want to add?
One of the problems that we have in society today is that people think of sex as an entitlement, when in fact it's a privilege. And that sense of entitlement enables them to induce sex by any means possible, including lying in order to get laid.
Mm-hmm. Lying to get laid. I love that title. All right, girl. Thank you so much for joining us, and we are going to continue your work. If you are a YouTube watcher of my channel or anyone else's, and you would like to contact Joyce, we'll put a link down below, and we'll make you have access to her website, her blog, and anything else we can give you that you might make a change where you live. Thank you so much.
Thank you.